Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Today, our guest is Shenan Charania. He is an executive coach, I would say a transformational coach. He works with a broad spectrum of clients, including executives, business owners, and housewives. He strives to help individuals see their capacity for transformation. Shenan, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Stephen.
Okay. Hey, look, I have a question for you. Now, when people think about coaching, a lot of them go immediately to athletics, but that's not what you do, is it?
No, and it's funny you mentioned that because that was my interpretation of coaching when I first came across the word or the concept. I think it was back in 2013. My friends were getting coached and they were talking about how we have this person that we talk to. It's just through conversation. He draws out the best in us and he creates a safe container and asks powerful questions that go beyond what we believe. And I looked at them and said, sounds like a scam to me. Because my relation to the word coaching was that, you want to become a Olympic athlete, you might want some coaching around it. But you're right, that's not what I do. And what I do is exactly what I've described the other person was doing in 2013, which is creating a safe container for people to relax into, have powerful conversations, and draw out from them their own value, their own potential, their own creativity.
So you mentioned 2013. I'm doing the math. So initially, I thought that you might have discovered coaching in college or even high school, but you're saying that you came to this in 2013. How did that happen?
Yeah, that's an interesting story, actually. In 2013, I found myself really questioning life. I was an owner of a Tim Hortons, which is a quick service restaurant here in Canada, similar to McDonald's in terms of, fast food chain, but it's based on baked goods and coffee. So I ended up becoming an owner of that one in 2011. After working there and working the ranks, and kind of that was my goal, I want to own this Timmy's. And my entire goal was based on, if I'm financially secure, I'll feel safe. I'll be okay in life. Because I sure don't have a passion to serve coffee every 30 seconds out of a drive-through window. So that was the whole point of me going after it. But at 2013, after being an owner for 2 years, I was thinking to myself, there's something missing. And I have no idea what it is. I think I was 29, maybe 30, 31 years of age. And when I started questioning myself, it really came to this point where I had to admit to myself, I might not know how life works because I went after this goal and it's not fulfilling, it's not meaningful to me, and there's something missing. Even though on paper nothing was missing, the business was doing over $2 million a year and it was quite successful. And so, like I said, I had some friends that were getting coached that had a life coach. And that's when I got interested in what is life coaching and became really curious about it. And as I explored it, as I hired that coach, he helped open up some dimensions in me that were dormant, helped me see that I was really operating from a place of other people's values or other people's beliefs that I've gathered over time. And I had lost myself in that process. Hence, I was chasing money more than anything else. So that was my first introduction to what coaching was.
I see. So, a lot of people either listening to you or watching this show would say, oh, he came to coaching from business and that he has always been a very successful, high-performing individual. So does this accurately describe your life, your start in life?
I would say no, actually. I am a grade 10 dropout. Actually, I have no education beyond grade 10, academic education, or grade 9 graduate, depends how you look at it. But I've never been somebody who has described himself as an overachiever or high performance. In fact, I always was struggling. I was always struggling to get to the next point or to achieve my goals or even be mediocre and average enough to satisfy myself. When I got into business, it wasn't about learning business. I didn't have this extent kind of desire. I just wanted to feel safe within myself. And upon investigating and sort of looking into myself later in life, I realized that the invisible, more unconscious part of me was always insecure. No wonder I wanted to feel secure, and finance just made sense to do that with.
Mhm. Okay, you mentioned something that strikes me. You said that invisible part of yourself. What do you mean when you say that?
Yeah, so to me, I've come to see within myself that there's these unconscious parts of me and conscious parts of me. And I think that's very generically speaking for every individual, every human being, that we're running on these unconscious patterns most of the time. And they could be insecurity, they could be fear, they could be shame, they could be guilt, which I'm also familiar with my past. Uh, and I was just very unconscious to these being the driving forces in my life, in my mind. And therefore, I was looking for the opposite of that, which I thought what I would get from outside, finance or relationships or confidence, right? Building confidence, building resilience, on top of the already insecure, distorted personality that I was operating my life from.
Okay. All right. So what's your approach to coaching? How do you approach, let's say, you work with a client. Yeah. What's your approach?
Yeah, the approach has shifted quite a bit since I started in 2014. I would say right now, most of the time, the emphasis is always on grounding in the beginning. Like that is encompassing everything. I put a high value on getting people grounded. I put a high value on, grounding myself. What I mean by that is just basically how we're looking at ourselves, how we're looking at the world, and how we're looking at other people. And grounded really means just outside of married to any of the perspectives we might hold, outside of being married to our social images that we use to navigate the world with. If we're grounded, we have more perspective, we're able to see things more in a fluid way, and out of that comes solutions. Out of that comes creativity, lightheartedness, playfulness, and we just navigate ourselves better in life.
Mm-hmm. I see. So I'm thinking about myself now. When I was in college, I was not a very confident person. That is, I did not know my potential to be successful. How would you work with a person like that? I mean, is this something that you can make them see, or is this something that you can invite them to see?
Yeah, it's a great question, Stephen. I would say it's an invitation.
Mm.
And why I'm saying that is because to your last question, I said the approach has been changing over time. So I ran into this understanding. I stumbled across the understanding called three principles, which was first discovered and articulated in the world by a man named Sydney Banks.
Mm-hmm.
And the three principles was pointing to how our experience as a human being is created psychologically. So we are believing our thoughts, and we've become conscious of our thoughts. And that's what we experience. What we think is what we experience. We're not experiencing circumstance or situations or the past. We're just experiencing the current thinking that's running through our mind. And there's a power behind all of that. There's an intelligence that's universal, that is powering all of the experience that we're finding ourselves in. And so I have come to see that that is a truth, that is a universal truth for everyone. So if I'm considering that as a truth, even if I don't see it, then I invite people to consider that as well. Consider that you might be experiencing your thinking. And as your thinking changes, your experience changes. As your thinking changes, your emotions are changing. And therefore, if that's all you're ever experiencing, it's very liberating because you're not bound by your circumstances or situations or perspectives of your past or anything else, even of the future. In other words, you're not even bound by your dreams. Even they can change as thought changes.
Wow.
So right? So if we're inviting people to see that, and usually I even tell all my clients, which they find really funny, I even start my speeches this way if I'm doing public speaking. And that is, don't believe anything I say. Which they find really odd, because we're coming to you with confidence that you have something to say that's helpful. Yes, but I would like for you to try and see it for yourself. Don't believe anything I say. So it is much more of a gentle invitation than trying to convince them of anything.
I like it. Now, do you use the same approach? And I'm just thinking about the range of people that you work with. Maybe I shouldn't assume this. Now, if a general laborer, a construction worker were to come to you and ask for coaching, would you accept such a person with that background as a client? Or do you look for professionals, CEOs as prospective clients?
No, actually, I've worked with a wide range of people, as you mentioned in the bio earlier, as we started this interview. I work with the human being, not what they're up to. Okay. So I've worked with people that are scientists and CEOs. I'm working with a lot right now, CFOs, senior execs. I've worked with housewives, as you mentioned. I've worked with barbershop owners. Okay. And all of them, I have found, are looking for more clarity, right? Fundamentally, people just want to get more clear. And most of us think we're going to find it with a better strategy system or life hack or a better book or a better mentor. When in fact, if people just start to slow down a bit in their mind and they start to look at how whatever they're up to, whether it's construction, whether it's running a 60 or $100 million company, if they're looking at it with a certain type of thinking, they're going to experience that kind of image perspective. And if they can see that they can generate whatever thinking that they're looking for, whatever thinking they can generate for their experience to be different is in their power. So on that level, it's like, it doesn't matter if you're in construction, engineering, the medical field, you're selling print paper. It doesn't matter, because you're looking at the fundamental person behind the business. So I work with anyone who's willing to look at themselves in a deeper way.
Is your approach the same, regardless of a person's background then? I mean, that is, if you work with the CEO in the same way you work with, let's say, a general laborer.
It's exactly the same on one level, in the sense that, I'm looking at a human being and I'm listening to them describe how they're seeing their issue, their problem, their obstacle. I'm not listening to them describing their obstacle. I'm listening to them how they're seeing their obstacle. So on that level, it's the same. Now, the art of coaching, I think, is to be able to relate that with which they're seeing, with whatever it is that they're seeing. So if somebody in construction comes up to me and says, here's what I'm facing, and here's the issues that I have, and here's the blind spots that I think I need to work on, and here's the obstacles I'm facing. Well, the art of coaching would be to relate their life and their circumstance to however their thinking is, and relate their thinking to how the nature of thought works and how their mind works. Okay. And in that sense, they would, of course, it would be relevant for them in their own life. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you've been working as a coach for several years now. What have you learned about personal transformation?
Personal transformation. So there's a few things. There's many things, actually. If I was to point out maybe two most important things or most valuable things about personal transformation. One is that everyone is capable of it. It doesn't matter your past. It doesn't matter your history. It doesn't matter your education. And the reason I say that is because we're trying to look at who somebody is beyond their personality, right? Beyond what they are presenting themselves or to the world. Like, who are we as human beings, and where does our experience come from? And is that, does that have the potential to create a completely different experience? And the answer to all of that, and as I see it, is yes, is a complete yes. And there's a very simple answer to that, why that would be a yes. And it sounds very, very simple that most people don't want to look at it. It's because thought changes. right? The nature of thought is that it just changes. We don't have the same thoughts we did this morning. We're not going to have the same thoughts 2 hours from now that we have now. And if somebody can start to get a little bit intimate there and look carefully within themselves, they start to see that that is true, that they're not tied to their personalities, they're not married to their perspectives. And if their thought changes, their life changes. So that's one of the most valuable things, is personal transformation is for everyone. Everyone is able to personally transform themselves. Everyone is capable. It's innate in us to change.
Wow.
And the second piece is personal transformation can be scary.
Okay.
That's what I've found with myself as well, you know. And one of the main reasons is because we're not so much scared of what the unknown is about, right? There's a lot of talk in the world I'm in that this is the unknown and I don't know what to expect, or I don't know how this is going to look, therefore I'm scared. I find that a lot of us are scared to leave whatever is familiar with us right now. Like, we're so accustomed to being the way we are. We're so accustomed to seeing the world as we see it currently, or we're so accustomed to the values and beliefs that we have been carrying for so many years that we feel it's a part of us and our identity. And it can be scary to leave the known rather than being scared of the unknown. Because in a very simple way, how could you be scared of the unknown? It's unknown. You don't even know it. How can you be scared of it?
Right. Yeah.
So it's a gentle, sort of intimate, step-by-step process to help people realize that fundamentally they're okay, fundamentally they're capable of change. And if they can start to invite themselves to play with those capabilities, then personal transformation can become, well, I wouldn't say easier, but much more gentle.
Okay. So if we're talking about individuals, personal transformation, so what about organizations? Let's say that an executive comes to you and say, I am not happy with the culture that now exists in my organization. Can a leader change or shift the culture of a company from your experience?
Yes, absolutely. Another great question. I have worked with some amazing leaders, especially in the last 2 years since the pandemic hit. And that's been a common question. Our culture is including friction, conflict. There's unalignment between people. There's lack of communication, lack of support. And what I have done, the way I've worked with them, is I listen to them. And I think, again, listening is one of the biggest pieces. We're not putting this value as a culture, as a society, as even a global society. I listen to them, and when I'm listening to them, most of the time I'm hearing them explain the symptoms of what's going on. So they can very well describe the visible. There's conflict, there's lack of morale, there is a lack of communication. My people are overstressed. So to me, those are all symptoms, because where is it coming from is a much more valuable inquiry than what to do about it, or how to adjust that, or how to shift that. And why I'm saying that is because I'll give you a real life example. I worked with a CEO. He had a director in his company, and the director had his own team. And the CEO said, can you work with the director, because he has a lot of disconnect with his team. There's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of stress, and a lot of his team members are just not communicating with each other, which is, of course, has its own implications negatively across the board. And so when I'm speaking with the director, I'm finding that he is getting overstressed and overwhelmed, right? But to him, it looks like it's coming from the culture that's presented, that's already in place. This culture needs to change. These people need to communicate better so that my stress will go down and we will become better at performing, and everyone else will be better at that. And the misunderstanding is that it's coming from what's already created, meaning the culture that's already present. And when I started working with them, I said, well, why don't we take a look at you, right? Like, what's going on in your world? How is it that you're feeling overstressed, overwhelmed, because you're responsible for this team. You're bringing your energy to that team. So in a very simple way, when we started working with him only, and he started getting more grounded, as we spoke about, just had more perspective, had more of a lighthearted view on how current things are in his team, in his company, was less scared about the future, was less focused on how other people are doing and how he's doing. Well, he started bringing that energy more towards his team. His team settled down. They started to trust him more. They started speaking about what actually is their problems. And because he was not taking it so personally, he was able to help them because he was grounded more, right? So he brought that to his team. I worked with a couple of members from his team after that, that really felt like they needed extra support. And with both the members I worked in his team, it was the same case. It was like, what is going on in your mind and how you're seeing it? Where do you think that experience is coming from? As they settle down more and they start to see, okay, if I'm experiencing stress, if I'm experiencing overwhelm, if I'm experiencing these constructive perspectives, and if I don't take them so seriously, because as I understand thought changes, I kind of don't want to take my current experience too seriously if I can't be happy with it. They get new experience, they get new thought, and that starts to become the energy that they show up to work with. And everyone who we engage with is always reacting to the energy we're bringing to the table. So if we're grounded, if we're lighthearted, if we're not taking ourselves too seriously, we're able to actually take the work a little more seriously because it's not about us. We're able to feel more secure because it's not about our insecurities anymore.
Okay.
And the results change. There's exponential implications to that.
Okay. You've mentioned energy a couple of times, and I want to get a handle on this. What I'm sensing is that you're saying that an individual, let's say in a workplace, shows up and he brings his energy into that space. Are you saying that individuals are just made up of lots of different energies? Is that the way the world works? I'm just trying to understand.
Sure, yeah. To me, when I speak of energy, I'm speaking of how we're showing up, So if I take my own example, if I'm stuck in some anxious thinking, for example, that's going to be my energy. My energy is going to speak before me in every room that I enter. If I'm anxious entering that room, no matter how much I act to be happy, excited, interested, that anxious energy is going to be felt by the room and the people in the room. There might, there's something off with Shenan, they might say. They might not even know what it is, but they can feel it. Whereas if I'm lighthearted, if I'm spacious, if I'm feeling okay, if I'm not anxious, if I'm feeling confident, for example, I walk into the room, same idea. That energy is going to speak before me. People are going to feel me. Oh, this guy, he's alive. He's present. He's here. I like it. It doesn't matter what I speak about at that point because they can sense the energy. So on a fundamental level, we're all energetic beings, and our energy, meaning how we're showing up, is created by the quality of thinking that's going on in our current state of mind.
Interesting. So what you've just told me is that, before a person enters any situation, one thing that's in their power, and I understand what you mean by grounding, is to get grounded. Is that, and then that grounded person can send something more positive into the world. Is that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're bang on. I've been using this current example lately a lot. I've been discussing with my clients, they come to the table with whatever issues they have or what they want to see through. And most of them, as of late, there's fear in the conversation, right? I have fear about this. I have fear about the world and where it's heading. I have fear about the future. So how do I deal with that? And there's a quote by Byron Katie. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Byron Katie. Yeah. So this quote I heard years ago, and it really stuck with me because it kind of humbled me. And the quote said, "A teacher of fear can never bring peace to the world." Now, to me, it landed very differently because it landed in a way that said, it doesn't matter what kind of context you're creating around the conversation of fear. So meaning if you're trying to figure out fear, if you're trying to fix fear, if you're trying to shift fear, you're still talking about fear. Even if it's a healthy conversation about fear, fear is the context.
Yeah.
If you want peace, you got to talk about peace. Where does it come from? So using that as an analogy or a metaphor, that's the same as us entering the room. If we're grounded, our energy is going to bring that to the room of which we are and how we're showing up. And people are going to feel that. That sets up the foundation for the conversation, the context, the interaction between people, whether that's one-to-one in a family setting or one-to-many in a business setting. If you're peaceful, if you're feeling good, confident, you have this alive energy, you're excited about the day, that's how you're showing up, and that's going to create the context of the conversation.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I was just having a conversation with a small group of individuals today, and I'm gonna get severe with this. And we were talking about the world, and this person happened to have been, from Norway. From Ukraine. She lives someplace else now. And when she talked about Putin, she said he has a lot of anger in him. The whole conversation kind of shifted in a certain way. So let me make sure that I'm not trying to represent what she said. I'm trying to understand what we can take into a conversation.
Yeah.
So at that point, then maybe what I experienced had less to do with Putin than what I was sensing, and this is not to make her wrong, about what was placed into the room. Can we do that? That is another example. I'll come back to this one. I hope that I'm making sense here.
Yeah.
I was at a family gathering and someone walked into the dining room and they were angry about something and then threw bottled water onto the table. So once again, it was less about what was happening in the family, but what that person brought into the room. So what my question to you then is that, there are a lot of controversial issues in the world today. Is it the person? You can have a good intention, but you can take some angst into the room whereby you want to engage a conversation to try to find a resolution. That's a little kind of alluded, but I hope you have enough there to talk with me about that. Or ask me a question if it's not.
No, well, I'll tell you what I'm hearing in that. What I'm hearing is, do we have the power in how we show up? Is basically what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it.
Right? So fundamentally, the answer is yes. We all have the power in how we're showing up. And I have found that most of us, I'll take my own example. I use my life as a laboratory and my past as a laboratory for many reasons. One of them is it really humbles me to always look at my own mistakes. And the second reason is it's a perfect way of seeing how experience shifts. So do we have the power to show up the way we want and sort of influence our environment? And again, that's what I'm hearing you asking. So if that's correct, the answer is yes. Most of us think that happens by fluke, or most of us think that happens by an external agency, or most of us think that we need to set ourselves up that way so that we can bring ourselves that way. And that's a lot of work, right? Because it doesn't always work out that way. No matter how much you try and set yourself up a certain way, you don't know what thought is going to enter you 5 minutes from now, and it could really left hook you, right? So I can present myself a certain way every day in a confident, very excited manner. And I could pick up the phone and it could give me some really bad news about my family, God forbid, and that could shift everything. And all of a sudden, my energy is completely gone. In a more sustainable way, when people start to see that their personality, our personality, my personality, is made of thought. It's made of the energy of thought. And thought, it shifts all the time. So if I'm not relying on my personality as the center in which I'm relating to the world with, if I'm not relying on my current thinking patterns, no matter good or bad, to relate to the world with, then I have more access to the intelligence behind life, right? So Sid Banks talks about this order of knowledge, a full order of knowledge that's available to every human being called wisdom. And that wisdom is not personal. It's not through personality. It's beyond our personality. In fact, when we're not so tied down by our personality, we're able to access this thing called wisdom. The mystics and the sages of the East have been talking about it for thousands of years. Jesus Christ talked about it, right? They all use different words and, of course, their own ways of expressing it. But if we can rely on wisdom, if we get a sense of it, if we get a little glimpse of it, even if it's a very dim glimpse, that there is something beyond ourselves that can provide us new thought, new creativity, new ways of being, whatever we need is available through wisdom, impersonal wisdom in the moment, then that is something we start to rely on more. And that is what shows up in the room more than our personality. And in fact, that even knows how to navigate our personality at the correct time and place. So if I'm relying more on that and showing up in a way where I don't know how I'm going to be, but I'm going to rely on wisdom more than my personal thinking to help show me up in this room or help assist me in whatever situation I'm in, then I might get a phone call from a family member that would be really bad news, God forbid, and I might get shaken up. But what happens is I get over it quicker and I'm able to ground myself better. And I'm able to find more perspective even in the bad news. Not to say I won't be, sidetracked by it or left hooked by it. Like, we're all human, we're going to feel it. But I'm less likely to act from that state. I'm more likely to access some intelligence and go, you know what, something's occurred, I need some space, and then I'll be back quicker. I'll give you a really quick example. Last year, towards the end of the year, November 22nd, I had a friend that had committed suicide. And that came out of the blue. I just couldn't see that person doing that to themselves. Their family couldn't see that happening. They just didn't seem like the person that would do that, as we know them to be. And it really shook me. I was about a week or 10 days. I was like, wow, that's rough. Like, I don't like this, we go through all the grieving feelings. But a week and a half later, about 9 or 10 days in, I found myself resetting. I found myself getting back to neutral. And I attribute that to fully embracing whatever experience was going on without making too much meaning out of it, without trying to project it on what it might mean. As I've gained a little bit of understanding of how thought works, I'm seeing that thought come in, producing images and perspectives of this person, producing memories with this person, but ultimately understanding that, you know what, Shenan, you're a little bit shook. You're going through an experience. Allow yourself to be that, with that experience. And I neutralized quicker. And the implications of that is that I'm able to help people because I'm neutralized quicker. I'm able to be there for people because I'm neutralized quicker. I'm less able to be there for people if I'm also grieving in the same mud, right? In other words, with the fear and peace example, I'm less able to help you with your fears if I'm also fearful. But if I'm peaceful, then I can kind of help you see through that. And the last bit to this example I'm sharing is that when I was 18, this really related to my experience when I was 18, my best friend passed away. And that was one of my first, actually it was my first heartbreak. I just didn't see that coming. It threw me into a deep spiral of depression. And I tried to make sense of it and I was really blaming myself in so many ways. I wish I could have done this, or I could have done that, or it took me 13 years, Stephen, to get over that death.
Wow. Yeah.
And I realized, wait a second, he's gone. I'm the one hanging on to it for 13 years. And so one of the many, many, many implications of understanding how experience is formed inside of us is that, for me, it was that as an insight to go, wow, I made so much meaning out of this death when I was 18. I hung on to so much of it that I brought that into my world, into my life, into all the things that I was up to. And it distorted things for me because I was always somewhat guilty of what? Of something I made up about this death. Whereas on November of last year, I understood that something has occurred. It means nothing. My mind is going to try and make meaning, but if I can sit with that and let it clear out, it took literally 10 days for me to neutralize again and come back to life.
Wow, that's enormously powerful, because what I just heard you say is that the insight that led you to neutralizing that distressing thought came from you.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could have told you that, 13 years ago or when you were 18, but maybe you wouldn't have heard me, but you heard you. That's enormously powerful.
Exactly.
So where does this, so let me roll back. Does every individual have this capacity to gain an insight around a subject that they may find distressing? Or
Yes.
was this unique to you?
Yes. Another great question. And I want to be very clear. The answer is absolutely yes. Everyone is capable. We are innately equipped with the capability to produce a brand new thought that we have never thought before, that can pierce through every single cloudiness, mental sort of distortion that we might be carrying towards any subject that we're looking at. And I think over time, we have misunderstood, or we've been taught in a way that has been interpreted that only a few of us can do this. Only a few are available or connected to this order of knowledge, as I said earlier, called wisdom. But no, we're all connected to this, innate kind of space within us where everything comes from. So all one needs to do is to start to look more within themselves. And as you mentioned, I had this insight when I'm working with people and they get slowed down a bit more and they get reflective and quiet, their mind quiets down a bit. That's in the quiet chambers of the mind, we can hear the nudges of wisdom. We can hear the whispers of new thought that can come through. But in our cloudy and our noisy mind, in our looking through our beliefs and our concepts and our understanding of how the world works, it doesn't show up. In my experience, the best I can get there is a rearrangement of my current thinking patterns, which really isn't the basis of creativity. It's just a rearrangement of how I was thinking before.
Interesting. So I want to look at some situations. I'm going to throw some things out there, and then I would love for you to respond if you care to, and if not, just let me know. So I'm just thinking about some things from the life of people that they struggle with. I'm one of these people, right? So one thing that people struggle with in talking with people is the past. How would you work with someone who struggles with something in their past?
I just love this question because there's been so many that have come to me for that. And I don't know why that is. I don't care to know why that is. I suspect, in other words, I might wrongly think that they come to me because I had such an issue with my past and I was stuck there for many years. As you might know, I don't know if you do, but definitely for your viewers, if they don't know, I lived about 10 years of my life in a gang-related world, right? I was involved in drugs and got into just a lot of confusion and chaos very early in my teens. And it led to gang-related activities, lots of criminal activities, carrying a gun, getting into shootouts. It got really intense, really dangerous. And in my late 20s, early 30s even, that started to come back up. Like, man, that was rough. I got to figure this out, right? Like, there's a lot of healing to be done there. And I continuously looked to my past and tried to open up these things that I was repressing. Guilt, shame started to surface. Oh my God, I'm guilty about, I'm so shameful about that. I need to work these things through me. And I did. And some of them I was successful with. Some of them really had lots of thick residue that stuck around. that look like it's going to need a lot more years to work with, a lot more support. And because I was thinking that way, I always had something to work on. I would literally wake up in the morning, be feeling completely fine, think about my past, go deep down in the shameful experience, and then try to work my way out of it. And one of my mentors once told me, let me get this straight. You feel perfectly fine in the morning. You think about all the things that you've done, and then you work through them. And I said, yeah, how do I do that better? How do I do that more efficiently? Do you have any tips for me? Do you have anything you can point me towards? And he looked at me and he said, what if you just don't think about them? And I was embarrassed. I was like, oh, I was really mad at him because I had been working on particular things for 2 years, particularly guilt and shame. And when he said that to me, it just struck me, because what he was really saying is, as you think about your past, you're bringing it into your current reality. Your past does not exist. You can't take anybody there. Your thinking about the past can be done right now. But if you don't think about your past, there's nothing to heal about your past. And I know that's quite controversial. At times, people will tell me, how dare you say that? Because this is what's happened to me, and that's what's happened to me. So again, it's an art, right? It's an art of coaching. It's an art of helping people see that there is a difference between what your past is and what your thinking is. And if you think about your past, of course, you're going to start experiencing your past, or a form of it, or a version of it in your current reality. And then it's going to make perfect sense to work through it. But if you realize that thought is the power, not the past, thought is the power, and you can use it to think about the past, or you can use it to think about the dreams, or you can use it to think about what makes you anxious, or you can think about what makes you grateful. Thought is the power. The emphasis is on the power of thought, not what it's pointed to. That's when you're in full control. You're not victimized by your past. My past still comes up. I've done some pretty crazy things that I'm not very proud of. And now that it comes up, sometimes it sort of hoodwinks me, and I find myself in this really negative feeling or negative state of mind. And now I have enough knowledge to go, wait a second, I'm in a really negative experience. I must have some low quality thinking. I don't investigate the thinking. I just chalk it up to low quality thinking. That must be it, because that's how it works. Quality thinking creates state of mind. And it leaves, it fades on its own accord. It does its thing, right? Causes a little bit of havoc in me, makes me feel like shit. And then it leaves. But if I grab it and start working on it, oh, it's sure to stay. You know? So that understanding really helps to go, thinking is not who you are. And the past is definitely not who you are. And the thinking combined with the past, oh, now you're in a mess. You're really not who you are.
Well, Shenan, that was amazing. Gosh, because, it's easy to think that if you have a thought that you don't like, that you need to grab it and wrestle it out of the brain. But you said that you discovered just to recognize that, oh, I'm thinking in a certain way, and then eventually it moves on. Did I get that about right?
You got it perfectly right. That is the nature of thought. It fades.
That's amazing. Got another one for you. It's very similar. And I'm not sure I'm talking about my life or the life of the world here, but people make mistakes in life. And sometimes, and I know that mistakes are in the past, but let's say just mistakes, and that theme shows up. How do you coach someone around that?
So coaching them around their mistakes, or how they feel about their mistakes?
Well, how to go beyond it, how to graduate from the class of mistakes to graduate school.
Right. Okay. Again, I'll use my own example here, because what I'm going to point to is perhaps beyond mistakes, in order to make sense of mistakes. And I will try and address the question as clearly as it's showing up. So for me, when somebody has made a mistake, big mistake that they just can't get over, they want to see through it, they want to make sure that they don't make those mistakes again. To me, it equates to the same exact thing as looking at your past. And why I'm saying that in a broader sense, on another level, I mean, mistakes are of the past. What is really valuable is to help understand, or help people understand, and understand myself, that there's an innocence to that. There's an innocence to what we're up to. So Sydney Banks once said that if you don't understand your own innocence of whatever it is that you did, then you really don't know how the mind works. Like if you're putting yourself down, if you're beating yourself up, if you're feeling guilty and dwelling in those feelings, you really have lost perspective. You don't know how the mind works. I'm paraphrasing what he said, of course. And what I've gathered from that is that we are acting, we are behaving from whatever makes sense to us at that moment, right? Everyone is doing the best they know how. Everyone's doing the best they can from what makes sense to them. So why I'm relating this to my story, or why I'm going to, is because I remember specifically, okay, so one of the things I was most shameful for was selling guns. I got into selling guns when I was in my 20s. And I was so blind to it. And I just look, oh, money, this is the life I'm in. I don't like myself, whatever. And later on, that's one of the things I couldn't work through. I worked through so many, and every time that came up, I was like so humiliated, shamed that I did that. And one of my mentors told me, Shenan, you did the best with how you knew life worked. You did the best with what you seen was the best. And I went to him, I said, no, that wasn't my best. I knew better. And he said, how do you figure? And I said, because when I was selling guns, there was something in me that knew that this isn't right. Well, that's why I hid it. That's why I never talked about it. I mean, surely that is evidence that I knew better. And he said to me, if you knew better, you would have done better. Do you do it now? I go, no, I don't. Well, you know better is why you don't do it. Simplicity of that was really impactful, because he was right. If I knew better in any given moment when I was actually doing that, surely I wouldn't be doing that. So why would I want to beat myself up for doing the very best I knew at that time? And it wouldn't make sense if I was to see that. Right? So for me, again, it's about insight. As you mentioned, the insight comes from within me to see how I did my very best with whatever current thinking I had available that made perfect logical sense to me at that moment. Therefore, I took that action, and I'm available to new thinking. I don't need to beat myself up. So that's how mistakes should be looked at by everyone. There's an innocence to how you're making mistakes. You're innocent in the sense, not in the way that you're copping out. Like, yeah, I'm free to make the same mistake again, and I'll just chalk it out to innocence. But no, really looking at it like, wow, I did my best with thinking that I had at that time. And that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay, I'm okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, the last item in this group of triplets. The past is one item in that list. Mistakes is the other one. The third one, from my standpoint, are regrets, all spinning on the same axis. So how do you coach someone around that expression of regrets?
Yeah, okay. So let's see. In a way, how it's showing up in my mind right now, there's two things showing up in my mind. One is looking at regrets, right? Here's what I regret about what I've done, or here's one of my regrets in my life. And if we're looking at what's already labeled regrets in our mind, we've decided, we've concluded that this is a regret. It has the energy that comes with it. It has a perspective. In other words, it's closed. It's called regrets. You can't be called anything else. And if we're looking at it at that level, it's very hard to see through it because it's already closed. You can't really see through what you've already labeled and concluded on and believed to be real. So if you look below that, or rather even before that, then we start to open our minds up to the fact that maybe what we're calling regrets is not a regret. It's not a reality. It might be real to us, but if it's not the ultimate reality, if it's not, I mean, what you call regret, I might just call a walk in the park, considering my past, you know?
Uh,
So what is real? Like, how is it that you're stuck in a regret while I'm calling that as, that's not much of a regret. You should hear my regrets, you know, and it becomes this kind of bravado competing thing that we go against. I'll give you an example. I worked with somebody who was telling me he was extremely distressed. And he was telling me, I'm really having a really, really hard time not eating the wrong foods. I need to eat the right foods and I'm not eating them. And he was just beating himself over. Now, I wasn't asking him what kind of foods he was eating. But at one point he mentioned that he dips into chocolate twice a week. Now, to most of us, it's like, what? Are you beating yourself that much for eating chocolate twice a week? To him, it was a huge deal. He was regretting eating this chocolate. In the nature of, regret, he's already closed his mind to that. It's already a regret to him, and he's trying to find his way out. But if he was to start to see that he found himself in an experience, he did something that he doesn't prefer to do, therefore he is regretting it. What he wants to take a look at it was where his preference was coming from. How come he didn't prefer to do this? Maybe he wanted to meet some goals for his weight. Maybe he's in a competition and this chocolate is going to impact him in a negative way. That would add some weight to the regret for sure. But if he starts looking there instead of the closed regret, he starts to see that what he's calling regret is created by his own mind, and he can look at it differently. He can think about what he's done completely differently. So he, in other words, is available to new thought about eating chocolate rather than the thought of regret. And if he can be available to new thought, he's still eating chocolate. He still doesn't like that he ate chocolate, but if he's not calling it regret, he's going to feel differently. He's not going to feel regret.
wow.
If he feels better about it, he can see himself out of it.
Right. He may eventually stop eating all of the chocolate.
Yeah. I was going to say, well, you should have heard mine. I should
but that's amazing. Wow. So Shenan, we're coming to the end, but I want to ask you one last question. Is there anything else you care to share with us that I have not asked you about your work, about what you do?
Well, I think, I don't know if it's particularly about my work, but I really have come to see in my own life through, so much trial and error, and life has humbled me so much in the ways of pointing me towards what actually is impacting life, what is creating experience. And so I would really encourage everyone to consider that the state of mind they're in is really the biggest variable in everything you do, whether it's looking at your past, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's eating your favorite snack, whether it's creating a business, going after your dreams, starting a project. The state of mind is the biggest variable. And why I'm emphasizing that, the more and more people I talk to who have things going on in their lives or they want to create big, beautiful things, they're not considering state of mind. That's the last thing they consider. And if it's the first thing you consider, then you start to get a more fluid relationship with life, with whatever you're up to, with whatever project you're up to. And if you have a more fluid relationship with it, then you can bring more out of yourself into whatever it is that you do.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Well, and your website is shenancharania.com, and I'll write it out in the description.
Correct.
Is that okay? Great. And your email would be found there as well for people who want to reach out to
Correct.
you? Okay, fantastic. Well, Shenan, thank you so much for being with us today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you very much for having me, Stephen.
Okay. You've been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Shenan Charania, a transformational coach. Until next time, good day